Hey guys, this is Joe Romo with the Columbus Symphony Orchestra's Know the Score, hosted by conductor George Del Gobbo. This week's Know the Score will focus on our upcoming concert, Exquisitely English, featuring selections from Holst, Purcell, Elgar, and more. Please enjoy this week's edition of Know the Score with George Del Gobbo.
English music for strings. This is one of my favorite types of music. I find the English string music to be so beautiful and lyrical and engaging, and I never get tired of listening to it or playing it. And so we decided to put together a concert featuring just that kind of music. It'll be, I think, a very happy, lovely evening of beautiful music. There's a strange circumstance in English music. There was a long period of time during most of the 18th and 19th centuries when England didn't produce anything like a major composer. The most famous English Baroque composer was Henry Purcell, and he died in, I think, 1759. And it wasn't until the end of the 19th century that another major composer, or what turned out to be a major composer, Edward Elgar, was born in England. So there was this long drought when other countries were producing composers like Beethoven and Chopin and Berlioz. England, not much of anything. So we're going to feature a piece by Purcell, the last great English composer of the 18th century. He was famous for opera, Dido and Aeneas. You probably have heard of that. But he also wrote a good deal of instrumental music. And we're going to play a piece called Shakoni in G minor. And it's basically a chaconne, that being a piece of music that's like a theme in variations. And it's presented over an ostinato bass, or bass line that repeats over and over again. In this case, he takes a little bit of liberty and he kind of modifies the bass line as he goes along. But it's a lovely piece for strings and a good example of English Baroque music. Then we take a long break, and it's and it's not until we get to Edward Elgar that we have English music in the forefront again. And the piece of his that we've selected is the Serenade for strings. Elgar was influenced more than any other English composer of this time by what was going on the continent, by the work of Wagner and others, and brought that kind of ethic into his music. So it's kind of less English and more intercontinental, if you will, than some of the other composers you're going to hear at this concert. But this Serenade is a beautiful little piece, very unpretentious, very melodic, very somber in some places. It's a three-movement piece. A serenade, typically, it's music that's intended to be played in the evening, at night. So it tends to be more calm, less excitable music. And I think that you'll find that this piece is delightful. Other composers who came to the fore at about this time, Holst, Gustav Holst, Rev von Williams. And we have both of them on our concert. We have two pieces by Holst. He was a music educator. He worked in the St. Paul School for Girls as a music master for nearly 3 decades, and wrote a number of pieces for them. And we're going to play 2 of those pieces. The concert opens with a performance of the first movement of the St. Paul Suite, aptly named because it was written for the St. Paul School for Girls Orchestra. A suite is usually a collection of dances of one kind or another. This particular first movement is a jig, and it moves along pretty well in a 6/8 time. It's a very lively, happy piece. Then we're going to play later on in the concert the Brook Green Suite by Holst, also written for the St. Paul Girls' School Orchestra, written during the last year of Holst's life. And it's a very kind of folk song-based suite, very easy to listen to, delightful music. We're playing then by Ralph Vaughan Williams, one of his chorale preludes based on Welsh hymn tunes. Vaughan Williams, maybe more than any other English composer of the time, was very interested in English folk music. And this was something that a lot of composers in the 19th century, with the rise of nationalism in a lot of countries at that time, a lot of artists and felt it was important to look back in the culture of the country and ferret out the folk songs and the folk traditions that gave the identity to the culture, to the country. And a lot of them spent a good deal of time searching out these folk songs and peasant songs and then using them in their music. Vaughan Williams was no exception. And these three, he wrote the suite of three chorale preludes, if you will, hymn preludes. We're going to play one of them. It's titled Rossi Medre, and that's the name of a town in Wales, and I probably pronounced it wrong, but as in all Welsh names, they're very difficult for non-Welsh people. But it's a delightfully beautiful piece of music. And what a chorale prelude basically does, what its original function was anyway, was to teach a congregation a new hymn tune. And this was done usually by the organist in the church, who would play the hymn tune, but he would decorate it in a way that made it very interesting to listen to. So you hear all kinds of embroidery, and then you hear the tune over that, and the tune progresses throughout the piece. Vaughan Williams did write this suite of three pieces for organ, and this particular one was then later orchestrated for any number of combinations of instruments. We're using just strings for this. And those people, Elgar, Holst, and Vaughan Williams, were kind of called the English Renaissance of composers, because it was a rebirth at the end of the 19th and into the 20th century of English art music. And around 1920 or so, there came a second renaissance of English music, of young composers. And perhaps the foremost composer in this group was Benjamin Britten. This second renaissance, was primarily dedicated to the song and to opera more than to instrumental music. And Britten was foremost in those categories. His writing for the voice is phenomenal. His operas are incredibly powerful. But he wrote a lot of other music. And we're going to play a piece called Simple Symphony. There's nothing really simple about playing it, but its form is rather simple. And what he did was he wrote this when he was very young. He was in his early 20s. He borrowed music that he had written for piano as a teenager and adapted it and changed it and made it into this symphony. He gave it the incredibly cute names to each movement, like boisterous, bourrée, and frolicsome finale. But basically, it's a symphony of 4 movements, and each movement performs the basic function of a symphony. There's a slow movement, there's a scherzo-like movement that's all pizzicato. All the strings are plucked, no bowed strings. The first movement is this most serious, and the last movement is kind of an a more upbeat, joyful movement. And all in all, it's a wonderful piece, and it displays his grasp of writing for strings in a very positive way. So we have on this concert the last great British composer in the Baroque period, and then after a long drought, the English Renaissance composers, and finally with Benjamin Britten, the English second Renaissance composers. Even if you don't know anything about any of that, it's a delightful hour or so of wonderful music for the most human of instruments, the stringed instruments. So we look forward to seeing you there, and thank you so much for your support.
We hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Know the Score with George Del Gobbo. If you are interested in supporting the CSO or purchasing tickets, please visit our website csoga.org, and be sure to check out our new digital broadcast pass so you can enjoy the sounds of the CSO from the comfort of home.